from Wisconsin.
Madam President, thank you, and I'm glad we're getting some debate on this amendment, which we're going to vote on, as I understand, shortly. And it's an important discussion, and I'm glad we've had a little exchange about it. And I want to first respond to what Senator from New Jersey had to say about this, Senator Lautenberg. He expressed a concern that there would be, because of my amendment, no funding for emergency operations centers if this amendment passes. Now, that's just absolutely incorrect. It's really just the opposite. To the contrary, Madam President, there will be $20 million for emergency operations centers that will be awarded competitively to those most in need. Senator Lautenberg cited the 9/11 Commission's endorsement of these centers. Yes, they did. And of course, I strongly agree. What he failed to note, though, is that the Commission recommended that the Homeland Security grants be awarded on the basis of risk, not earmarks, such as the one requested by Senator Lautenberg. So to suggest, of course, there may well be a need in New Jersey, and I respect that. And I'm not saying that that program wouldn't qualify under a merit-based analysis, but it is not based on actual risk analysis, and that's the problem. If there are worthy projects that the Senator has requested, then I would hope he would feel confident that these communities in New Jersey will be able to compete successfully for the grant. So, Madam President, I'm sure it was not intentional, but it is just plain misleading to make the Senate believe that these centers are being taken away by my amendment. It is the opposite. In fact, if you look at the way this currently operates, if we don't change this, currently the Senate bill directs that half of all these emergency operations center funds, Madam President, will go to only 10 states. The House earmarks all of these funds and a fourth of the pre-disaster mitigations funds. And last year, FEMA only funded a tiny fraction of the emergency operations center applications it received because 64% of the funding went to earmarks. So on this program that the Senator from New Jersey and the Senator from Arkansas were talking about, 10 states get 50% of it, and 40 states have to share the other 50%. Now, what are the odds that that comports with any kind of rational analysis of real risk? Very small, and I guarantee you, because they're earmarks, that analysis was not done. It's not possible, because they were not put in the context of the comparative risk that is involved. So to respond to some of the remarks of my good friend from Arkansas, I understand that the Senate has not earmarked any of the pre-disaster mitigation funds. However, if my amendment does not pass, FEMA will have to deal with the earmarks in the House report. And I don't question that some of these earmark requests may be legitimate. But if they are legitimate, then they should have no trouble in a fair competition for the funds based on merit and risk. And, Madam President, I think this is really the key, even for those who support earmarks in other contexts. The problem here is that these are highly technical projects. We're talking about communications equipment, flood prevention projects that require engineering studies and the like. We don't have the expertise out here in Congress to make an objective determination of which projects are the most worthwhile. So who gets the funding? Whoever is able to somehow get an earmark. Without any real analysis, without any real consideration of merit, who's at the greatest risk, where in the country we really need to think about these disasters more than others, that's no way to handle potential disasters and get ahead of them. The earmarks are being sent to small communities to set up operation centers that don't need them, while state centers remain underfunded. And I can say that during recent flooding in Wisconsin.
Yield for a question.
Yes, I'd be happy to.
My understanding is that the Senate bill, as you have described, directs half of the emergency operation funds to only 10 states. And there are 50 states in America. But half of these emergency operations center funds, and that doesn't make much geographic sense. If you look at Illinois, Iowa, New Jersey, New York, Montana, Washington, Rhode Island, east and west, all over the country. But maybe my friend from Wisconsin can describe, what do they have in common? 9 of these 10 states have in common.
Madam President, I can tell you that one thing they don't have in common is any analysis of the need or the requirement that this be done in their communities. What they have in common is that somebody stuck an earmark in this bill. Now, it'd be different, I'd say to my friend from Arizona, if these 10 states had shown on the merits that they had the risk in their communities and they need to get ahead of these disaster situations, that would be great. And in that case, I could support that only 10 states get half the money. But when there's absolutely no analysis, and where this actually undercuts the very integrity of the programs that are trying to protect the lives of the American people, and leave the other states to fend for themselves with regard to 40 states fighting for the other 50%, this is really a terrible way to protect the American people from disasters. So I would,
for another
answer
question.
to the Senator, I would say there's only one explanation, and you and I both know what it is. Somebody got an earmark, and that's all.
Additional question I have for my friend from Wisconsin. Isn't it true that the administration has requested that this entire program be canceled?
The entire program?
Yes.
They want the program merit-based. They want the program to be based on actual need for these emergency operating centers.
Isn't it true that the Office of Management and Budget recommended this as one of the programs to be eliminated, as the President announced?
We want it eliminated because of this practice that you and I, Madam President, are discussing, that because of the use of earmarks, which undercuts the integrity of the program, they want to say this isn't worth it.
In other words,
we're trying to, by this amendment, will have the effect of restoring its legitimacy.
In other words, the administration believes that we need emergency operations center funds, but not in the manner that, because of the requirements of Homeland Security. But this process is so badly flawed that they wanted to go back to do away with this and go back to a merit and needs-based system. Is that correct?
Absolutely right, Madam President. Say the Senator from Arizona, the President of the United States is pressed to ensure that these funds are awarded competitively on the basis of risk. That failing, which is what we will have if we don't pass this amendment, the recommendation is to not go forward. And I accept the premise that so many members have identified here, that this is a worthwhile program, as long as it's based on merit and need. And so the Senator from Arizona is correct on that. The President of the United States is clear on that. We have a chance here to fix this program, get away from the earmarks, and make sure it can continue. Otherwise, there will be continuing efforts to say this isn't really what was intended. And obviously, it wasn't what was intended. Yes, it's one thing to get an earmark for a museum somewhere in your state. And that does take away from the general funds, and the Senator from Arizona and I have strong feelings about that. But it's another thing to use this in a situation where a program has been specifically set up to figure out where in the United States is it most important that people have money to be able to do the things they need to do to protect the lives of the people in their communities because of their particular vulnerability to disaster.
Well, gentlemen, respond to one more question. So you're not saying that we don't need emergency operations centers in America. You are not. We would not be eliminating the need for emergency operations centers. Let's be perfectly clear. But what you are saying is we need to eliminate it in this form, which does not give the highest and most needed priority to these emergency operations centers around the country. And that, in other words, we still have a threat to our nation's security, but this isn't the way to meet it. And that we can come up with a far better and more efficient way to meet those requirements.
Madam President, say the Senator from Arizona, we do need a program for emergency operations centers. What we don't need is another trough for people to feed at for earmarks. And if the program becomes just that, which I fear it's becoming, then it doesn't stand on its own merits. This is truly an opportunity to protect it, and I thank the Senator from Arizona for his questions, and I yield the floor.
The Senator from Missouri.
I listened with interest to the questions and the conversation concerning Senator Feingold's amendment, and I rise to strongly support this amendment. One of the fantasies around here, and I yield to the long experience of my two colleagues in fighting this battle on earmarks, is this fantasy that the money for earmarks is created out of nothing. That somehow the money for earmarks just lands on everyone's desks, and that no programs are hurt by the earmarking process. That no money is taken from worthy projects for earmarking. Truth be known, I can give example after example in the budget that over the years, good competitive programs have been cut while earmarking has skyrocketed. The burn grants are a good example. Burn grants are a competitive process in every state where they can compete for law enforcement dollars based on need, decided at the local basis. What has happened to the funding for burn grants over the years? It's dwindled, while in that very same budget, earmarks have steadily and continually grown over the last decade. This is a perfect example of robbing Peter to pay Paul. This amendment will say you must compete for these dollars based on need. And isn't that how we should be spending the public money? Last year, FEMA received a total of 675 individual Emergency Operation Center project applications. 675 applications they received for this funding last year. They were only able to select 22 of them for funding. You know why? Because 64% of the funding went to earmarks. So because of the earmarking, there was less money there for worthy projects that maybe, on merit and need, were much more important to protect people than the earmarking process. And this is a textbook example of taking a pot of money and deciding through some waving of a magic wand that it goes individually to 10 states without any discussion as to whether or not those are the 10 most needy projects or 10 most needy states. No discussion whatsoever. I will tell you, in my state, there have been years where we have been under a constant emergency declaration. Flooding, ice storms, tornadoes. We have floodplains. In fact, the National Association of Floodplain Managers supports Senator Feingold's amendment. You know why they support Senator Feingold's amendment? Because they say it is causing floodplain managers around the country to quit planning to mitigate because they can short-circuit the process and just go for an earmark. Why do the work and plan and compete as one of 22 out of 675 if you know the easiest way and the best way to do it is just to hope and pray that your member's on the right committee? Just say it like it is. Just hope and pray that your member's in the right committee. And so this is a great opportunity for everyone who believes we need to be careful with the way we spend our money to be counted. This is a great opportunity because this is very clear. This money is being taken from projects and being earmarked for projects. And as a result, 40 states are going to have less than a 50% chance to participate in this kind of emergency funding. And I strongly support Senator Feingold's amendment, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. And I yield. Thank you.
Senator from Arizona.
I'd like to thank the senator from Minnesota, not only for her comments about this particular issue, but her dedication to reform, transparency, and to making sure that the American taxpayers' dollars are wisely and appropriately spent. And it's been a pleasure working with her on various reform issues. And I would argue this may not be the last time that the three of us are on the floor of the Senate. When you look at the approval ratings of Congress, not just now, but for a long time, we're not held in the highest of esteem, and sometimes for good reason. Sometimes for good reason. We have ongoing scandals concerning the use of public funds for earmarking and pork barrel projects and rewards to members of Congress that have caused them to be in federal court, and indeed even members of Congress residing in federal prison. This is an important amendment because as the votes line up, I think we will see on both sides of the aisle, we will see the members of the Appropriations Committee probably voting on the theory that if they lose one, they will lose a number of other efforts to eliminate earmarks and pork barrel spending. I hope that would not be the case because this is particularly egregious. It's particularly egregious, this legislation which Senator Feingold's amendment is intended to cure is about Homeland Security. And to direct half of the Emergency Operations Center funds to only 10 states obviously is a gross misuse of the taxpayers' dollars and could conceivably cause us not to fund emergency operations centers that are more badly needed and could then put our homeland security perhaps in some jeopardy, or certainly not ensuring our homeland security to the best expenditure and wisest expenditure of tax dollars. Could I just remind my colleagues, last year's appropriators provided $35 million for the Emergency Operations Center grant program, but earmarked $12.5 million of them. The Department of Homeland Security received 613 applications asking for $264 million for the purposes of the grant program to construct emergency operations centers. There's clearly a need for this money in the states, and it's unfortunate that many of the applicants were turned down by the department because there was no money left, because we'd already spent half of it on earmarked projects, which had no competition. Again, I want to emphasize to my colleagues, this is not a matter of whether we need emergency operations centers. It is simply a matter of whether we are going to wisely and appropriately use the taxpayers' dollars where it is most needed. There has been no screening, no authorization, no hearing held on this issue, and it was put in, obviously, in an appropriations bill in an inappropriate fashion. So I urge my colleagues to support the amendment by the senator from Wisconsin, and I congratulate him on proposing this amendment. Madam President, I yield the floor.